Former contractor Edward Snowden promised that he had treasure troves of information to release about the NSA surveillance state. Once again, he's making good on his word. The German newspaper Der Spiegel reports that internal NSA documents from previous Snowden leaks detail how the agency has been focusing on tapping into all types of smartphones. The newspaper explains, quote, according to the documents, it set up task forces for the leading smartphone manufacturers and operating systems. Specialized teams began intensively studying Apple's iPhone and its iOS operating system, as well as Google's Android mobile operating system. Another team worked on ways to attack Blackberry, which had been seen as an impregnable fortress until then. So, is anything safe anymore? Christopher Wolf is a director of Hogan Lovells Privacy and Information Management Practice Group and is here to help me break down these latest developments. Chris, thank you so much for stopping in.
Happy to be here.
So, can you go ahead and break down some of those latest developments?
So I think the important thing to note about the Der Spiegel article is that it said that there was no indication of widespread spying using the abilities that were described in the article with respect to the smartphones. And I think one would expect that the NSA would develop the skills and the abilities to access probably the leading tools for communications these days, and presumably to use those tools consistent with the law.
And how do we know that they are being consistent with the law?
So, as we've discovered, there were some lapses with respect to what the NSA has done, and we know the FISA court reprimanded the NSA for at least some of those. We also know that we have in the United States a framework that requires FISA court approval of any surveillance under the FISA Act, as well as legislative oversight. Now, obviously, the Snowden revelations have put a lot of focus on that structure, and there's serious question right now whether or not it is enough. So President Obama has appointed a White House senior group to analyze the issue. We also have the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board that is looking at this. And in the wake of the Snowden revelations, we've seen the FISA court declassify some of its opinions, as well as the NSA produce more public material. At the same time, we have some of the online services litigating their right to disclose more information. So we are going to see more information. There is going to be more oversight, and one would hope there would be more controls and more protection of privacy. But I think this story from Der Spiegel is not terribly astonishing.
It's not terribly astonishing, and as you say, they are trying to build that oversight. However, I do need to point out that that group that President Obama assembled, there are a lot of questions as to whether they would be a rubber stamp court, just like the FISA allegedly is a rubber stamp court. But
knowing some of the people in that group, knowing them personally, I doubt very seriously they're going to be a rubber stamp group.
You doubt it, even though they have serious ties with the Obama administration.
Well, Peter Swire is one of the members of that group, and in fact, prior to his appointment, he was quite critical about the NSA and quite concerned about the privacy issues, and I don't think he's going to change his stripes now that he's been appointed to that group.
Very interesting. So we had a guest on last hour to talk about these latest revelations. His name is Higanshu Nigam, and he's the founder of SSP Blue.
Yes.
And he said that these leaks aren't surprising to the NSA. They're not new. Let's take a listen to him.
I can speak as a former prosecutor. I think there's a lot of things that I think there was a senator on in your news hour just a few minutes ago saying there's a lot the public doesn't know that if they knew, they would support things. And having been in the courtrooms of America, seeing the crazy amount of stuff that criminals can do, there are tactics that you take. But at the end of the day, they're best part about all this, and I do support this side as well, very well, is there is a legislative, judicial, and executive branch of government. And when the Constitution was created, it was built on the whole notion that different branches will balance the powers of each other out.
So he went on to say that if the NSA has these capabilities, there are certain ways, certain companies that can protect users' encryption data. Do you hold similar views to this?
Well, I do, and I agree with Hemu. I think he's pretty knowledgeable in this area, and we do have a system of checks and balances. My law firm, Hogan Lovells, and I was one of the authors, along with my partner in our Paris office, Winston Maxwell, produced a white paper this year that shows that in other countries there is not the level of oversight or protection for the National Security Agency's access to those countries' citizens' data. And I think that's a really important distinction that's kind of gotten lost in the wake of the Snowden revelations that needs to be pointed out. Say what you will about how well our framework works. We have a framework.
That's a very good point, a very astute point. Now, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, back in 2011, the Obama administration secretly won an appeal in the FISA court to reverse restrictions on the NSA back in 2008. And those restrictions dealt with the use of intercepted phone calls and emails. So can you talk about this a little bit more? What does this say about the NSA?
So I suspect that there will be an examination of that opinion, a re-examination of that opinion, to see whether or not that ruling was justified in terms of the needs. I think, as Hemu pointed out and as others have pointed out, there are legitimate needs for surveillance to protect the country against threats. The question is whether or not that effort to protect the country oversteps the protection of privacy that all of us also are entitled to. So there's a balance that needs to be struck. But I think, as the Commerce Department General Counsel, Cameron Carey, pointed out in a speech a couple weeks ago at the German Marshall Fund, there's been no indication that the information that the NSA has obtained.
I'm so sorry to have to cut you off, but we are just out of time. Christopher Wolf, a partner at Hogan Lovells, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.